the chilled products chilled. You go in your own house, you've got a heat pump in your dehumidifier, you've got a heat pump in your refrigerator, you've got a heat pump in your air conditioner. Even if you don't think you have heat pumps, you have heat pumps. You have air conditioning in your car, yeah, you've got a heat pump in your car. It's everywhere.
Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, a weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. I'm Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by Senior Editor of GBA, Kylie Jacques.
Hello.
Fine Homebuilding Editorial Advisor, Mike Gurton.
Good day.
And our Senior Producer, Jeff Rose.
Hello.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, it's great to see you all today. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
Delighted.
We got so much to talk about. I want to launch right into it. So for starters, today's after show is going to be about landscaping and outdoor spaces, and I couldn't imagine two better people to be on that show with your respective experience, and Jeff's into it too, so should be an amazing show, and if you are not already an all-access member, I hope you'll consider it. So consider that the plug for today. Mike, you've been working on your flashing.
What's the topic, though?
Landscaping.
Just general landscaping?
Yeah, outdoor spaces, how it improves your life, how it makes your indoor life better.
Oh, Mike, we'll narrow in on it when we get there.
I think it was tying the indoor and the outdoor together.
Sure.
In the landscaping. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, that's a good focus.
No, it's all good stuff.
Yeah.
So, Kylie, what have you been up to? It's been a while since you've been on the podcast.
It has been. And I've actually been working in the landscape because that's my area of most interest in terms of, my skill set, what I can do. So I've been enjoying helping my folks out. And my battle is I'm still taking care of invasive species. So that's how I spend my free time.
Digging out barberry, or what is it you have to deal with?
It's spirea. Spirea shrub, like a wild species spirea. Like the straight up, one screw in nature, and now it is taking over the whole of the neighborhood, and I think it originated on their property. So
have you had occasion to rent a backhoe to help with this project yet?
No, it's nothing like that. I'm talking teeny tiny little seedlings everywhere.
Oh yeah.
Oh, it's just crazy. But that's just one of the species. It's very biodiverse, the invasive species.
Well, we'll talk more. Yeah, we'll talk more about that after the after show, or in the after show. That should be. I'm curious because that's a hassle. We deal with that too. Mm-hmm. Mike, you've been working on your flashing. It looks like replacing some. It looks like a transition between a sidewall and a roof.
Yeah, I'm kind of overwhelmed with the way that project started as like most things. My wife asked me, she said, we need to repaint the dormer trim on the front of the house. And I said, okay, I'll take care of that, and put the ladder up. And I'd kind of been ignoring the flashing. I could see it was starting to deteriorate. It's old lead flashing, which was really common to use around here anyway in the 80s and 90s. And we thought it was invincible, but it's not. And it's deteriorated to the point where there's very little left. And I'm surprised I wasn't getting roof leaks in at the bottom of the dormer. So pull the trim off there and notice that the rain screen, the way I'd set the rain screen space for all the trim, is working well. But then as I looked around the cheek walls of the dormer, I said, well, the white cedar shingles aren't looking too good. They're kind of rotted along the edge where they come too close to the roof. So this morning I set up some roof jacks and planks to strip and reside those cheek walls. And I'm going to build overhangs on the rakes of the dormer, which I should have done originally. But, in keeping with the Cape style that my house is, it didn't traditionally have overhangs on the rakes. So now it's turned into a whole big dormer rebuild project, which originally, didn't include getting a building permit, but now I figure, well, front of the house, I better get a building permit. So Got that
I
yet?
saw a creative solution to that problem recently, Mike, on the way to another photo shoot for Fine Homebuilding, and someone had just put a board over the rotted siding that abutted the roof, which you might consider. I was like, wow, that's
That
pretty
sounds
good.
pretty.
Wow. Talk about,
Yeah.
yeah,
The
just out of sight, out of mind. Yeah,
the
Wow.
absence of an overhang on the rake is like perplexing to me. Why not? Why
yeah.
not put an overhang there? It's
It's a design aesthetic. When you look
yeah,
at a Cape house, they had almost no overhangs on the eave or the
right,
rakes,
right.
and
I know. Just originally, why not?
I
Why
can
not? It's
only
because of
guess.
wind.
Yeah, the wind,
Wind?
right?
Yeah.
Just
Ah, okay, okay, okay.
Uplift. You rip
oh,
your roof right
Uh-huh,
off,
uh-huh.
so you
I
don't put
got
an
it.
overhang.
Right, I
but
hadn't thought about that. Okay, so it's practical, the
yeah,
absence.
It was, before we had
Hmm.
hurricane ties and,
Right.
structural screws and
exactly. Yeah.
Is that going to bug
speak.
you, Mike? Seeing
Is
that?
what gonna bug me? Putting
The
the
overhang that,
over
yeah, yeah,
Oh, you mean to look at them?
yeah.
No, because I have I built a garage behind my house about 7 or 8 years ago, and I thought, "I'm not making the same mistake twice." So I put good, like 16 or 18-inch wide or deep, overhangs on the rakes, and, yep, you can see the siding below there doesn't get the same it's in a bit of a rain shadow underneath
Uh-huh.
there, at least partway down, so that helps a lot. So, yeah, and, it's that aesthetically, it's gonna work.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't bother me at all. But now I understand. Patrick, originally I thought it was strictly an aesthetics thing. Now that I understand that there's the wind uplift issue, it's a little more
Yeah.
acceptable that there's not one typically.
If you look to vernacular architecture, Kylie, there's usually a reason for everything,
Uh huh.
and
Uh huh.
it's largely what works and what doesn't.
Right. 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 Yeah.
How about you, Jeff? Have you had any successes? Is your deck all done? Have you had cocktail hour with the missus out there yet?
Cocktail
But
hour.
the deck is all done. Just needs a good cleaning, but that's just a. It
That
just
doesn't
needs a,
prevent drinking. I think you'd
no,
agree.
no. Drinking prevents cleaning, but that's
That's
How did the
hilarious.
cables go together? Did that work
everything
out
went
good?
in. Everything went fine. Yeah.
Good.
Did you use a system that listeners might know?
Yeah. It was a Feeney cable rail, so it was,
Uh huh.
but it's
I
all
think that's
done.
the gold standard at right in most estimation is the Feeney products. No one's saying anything. Okay, we'll
Get rid
move
of
on.
the
I
nice
don't know if
thing
we're
is
allowed to. Right.
the nice thing with Feeney is I can go to 2 local lumber yards within 15 minutes of my house, and they both stock the whole
Yeah, that's
the
helpful.
whole bunch of the parts. So
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
never like when you order stuff online and you forgot 2 or 3 things or something breaks and you're like, "Oh, now I gotta wait another week for that part to come in."
Yep. Yep. I misordered, and I was missing some of the end cap, little covers. Not a huge thing, but went to the local lumber yard. They had them in stock. So
Yeah.
That's really cool. So we're, in the coastal areas where this stuff is really popular. So it makes sense, that they would have that stuff. I also think the margins are probably amazing, right, Jeff?
yeah.
Speaking of projects that got out of hand, I was going to add a ceiling fan to my office because it didn't sell in the yard sale. Well, that turned into cutting a hole in the ceiling to fishing wires for a a ceiling fan rated box and then I started seeing the really bad drywall job I did on the ceiling in this space. So I ended up floating that all out. And I will tell folks, if you're using setting type compound and it's starting to go off, just throw it away. Get on with your life. Spend $10 on a new bag or whatever it costs. And oh my God, what a pain that was to deal with. So I
Well,
floated it with all. Go ahead,
was that
Mike.
the original problem when you first did the drywall job that you were using setting compound and it went hot on you, and
Yeah.
so it was a little rough, so now yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think, if you haven't used this stuff, when it starts to go off, it doesn't feather edge at all. It just kind of just stays like leaves ridges from the knife, and it's really obvious.
And it only
It's-
gives you, like, about 30 seconds from when it starts stiffening up, when it's just like you're
Totally useless.
moving your trowel along or your drywall knife, and all of a sudden you feel it dragging, and then by the end of the motion,
It's
you've
like
just
ting.
got
It just like
it looks like an old glacier.
Super useful stuff. If you use it correctly, it can be a real pain if you don't. So do your homework before you start playing around with that stuff. So I saw an amazing thing in the New York Times this past week, and it was a retrospective of Barbie's Dream House, which debuted in 1963. And the thing I took away from the very beginning of the article was this toy came out when women, even if they had money to get their own mortgages, often were not approved for them, which I found really disturbing. But it shows how this toy has evolved through history and keeping up with the styles aesthetically of architecture and social history, and it's super interesting. Did you have a Barbie dream house, Kylie?
I did not, but I remember the friend who did. I remember my Barbie dream house time. Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting that I really want to read that. I haven't had a chance to yet. I think that's the first time in which I became aware of like the house as a structure, because this thing went beyond Barbie's life. This was like where, like where she was housed. I do remember, I mean, maybe I was atypical. I wasn't particularly focused on Barbie. I remember looking at the elevator and how it worked, and, I was checking out the wallpaper and how it all went together. And I spent a lot of time looking at the structure of the thing. And hopefully other young kids playing with that did too, just because it gives you a sense of like, oh, this is home equals structure. We all live in something, those are important lessons. I
had a friend with one too, Kylie, and I remember the same thing is like, oh, wow, this is pretty cool. And the version that came along, I think it was the late 70s or whatever, was an A-frame. So it's an architectural style I still enjoy to this day. And the elements would pull apart so you could actually see how the thing was put together. And
I didn't see that.
I'm pretty sure I bought this at a yard sale one time. I'm pretty sure this is a piece of furniture that came in that original Barbie's.
Patrick,
and
you
it's
have
a dresser.
Totally different one. Oh, that's so neat. Oh, cool.
And what's cool about this dresser I'm showing them is like instead of the drawers pulling out of the case, they rotate out on a pivot, and I was like, so awesome.
Yeah, that's so Mad Men. That reminds me. Yeah, that whole time era. Yeah.
That gives me an idea when I build my kitchen in my new house. I like that swing out rather than the slide.
Isn't it cool?
Yeah.
It really does make a lot of sense.
So I will put a link to that in the podcast page. You also check it out if you played with one of those as a kid or you're curious about the history of it. I found it really interesting.
I'll have to look into the A-frame because that's news to me. That's not what I'm visualizing. I think there must have been.
So it's had many iterations,
maybe that was her
Kylie.
I was going to say maybe that was her cabin getaway.
Well, the A-frame, because when I was reading through the article and I saw A-frame, so I'm looking, and what they call an A-frame is really just like it's like a short walls on like a first floor, and then a very wide, tall, steep roof that goes up. So it's not the A-frame that we think of from like the 50s, 60s vacation home in the woods. It's a little different design, but
cool looking. It's my favorite.
And under the eaves, under the roof.
Yeah. And during the 80s, the Barbie dream house got way bigger.
Yes,
like olive housing.
Right.
So our first feedback letter comes from Ethan. Hey, podcast crew. First off, I really enjoyed the show. The last few years, I've dove into building science as a 23-year-old business owner. As a customer/friend tells me, you don't know how just to do it, but you know what to do it. And this is the place where I find out why. Also, as a Western Pennsylvanian, I always enjoy the references to things in Pittsburgh houses. But the reason for the email, horizontal baluster railings, cable rail from episode 571. As a GC that specializes in metal railing fabrication, I've had many conversations about horizontal balusters. It seems the code was changed due to a study that concluded that under a certain age, I think 3, a child can't climb over any railing, including ones with a ladder-like infill. Then after 3, they can climb anything, even a sheet of glass. So the climbability of the railing really doesn't matter. It's just a little insight into the reasoning of the code. This is from Ethan in Indiana, PA. What do y'all think about this? I don't know.
I've not heard this study, but I spoke with Glenn Mathewson about this a couple of times, and he said that it was in the 2000 IRC was where they had that restriction that any horizontal elements or climbable elements couldn't be in a guardrail system, whether it's interior, exterior, and that was taken out the following year in 2001, I think, with one of their supplementals because it got so much pushback and because, as Glenn stated, they could find no research showing any deaths of children from having climbed over a rail and then leapt to their injury or anything, any deaths or serious injury. So without any substantial reason for having it there, they removed it. Plus, there's so much pushback from builders and homeowners that like that
The
design.
look. Yeah. Right, Jeff?
I know. I was going to say, did you just go
It's
through it?
everywhere in commercial building too. So
Yeah.
And if you ever try to climb a cable system, whether you're a child or an adult, it's nearly impossible because the
Because it's so
cables keep
wobbly.
moving in and out,
Yeah.
and you're just it's
You
not
can't get a grip.
really
Yeah.
climbable. Yeah,
You're more likely to fall backward than anything else. Right?
exactly. Yeah, your
I would
feet
say
slide
the
up.
far larger problem are weak rails that are, built by people who are amateurish, and it's an important thing to get right.
I'll raise my hand on that one from 30 years ago, where we'd nail our posts to the framing of the deck, and nail the balusters to the things we did back then. You didn't even think about it.
I think you'd agree that the systems we have now are pretty robust. It's meant to, worst case scenario, protect people from falling off the deck.
I mean, there's argument there for buying a system through a vetted manufacturer, a large, recognized, renowned
Things that are
manufacturer.
tested, right, Kylie?
Things that are tested, right,
Yeah.
right, and also the tech support or the availability of, what you need when you're in the middle of it and you got to run to the local, right? Or, yeah.
Jeff, your posts still rely on 4x4s in sleeves. Is that how that works, or you stained the 4x4s? I
I
forget.
just stained the 4x4s, yeah. Mm-hmm. But I followed Mike's article, so I figure I'm okay.
I think that's the safest bet.
That's awesome.
This comes from Ben. Hey, Patrick, I'm sure other people would have commented on this, but the 56 by 59 base that the Miele washing machine is recommending would be in metric. That is 56 centimeters by 59 centimeters. So it wouldn't be a huge area outside the machine footprint. Well, Ben, no one else brought that up, and I'm sure you're right, so I feel a little silly about that. Yeah, we were thinking it was in inches. We also heard from James on the same subject. Hey, podcast crew, I happen to have that particular Miele washer that you discussed on podcast 573, and I think those install instructions sound like overkill. Admittedly, ours sits on a slab in the basement, but it hardly vibrates at all. I had a Tupperware container full of loose screws sitting on top of the machine for a few months, and it never rattled, even when we were doing laundry. When it's spinning at full speed, the loudest part is the whirring of the drum and motor. James, I don't think that counts if it's on a concrete slab, right? That is way different than if it's on a framed floor, right? Mike says he doesn't.
Okay.
Do you agree?
Well, it's I've had horizontal drive washers on the second floor of a house with no extra anything, and never had. It didn't sound loud to me, and the homeowners didn't seem to think it was anything noisier than a regular vertical axis or an old vertical axis washer.
Yeah.
So
Nearby bearing walls, things that could have been attenuating this vibration? No.
That interior wall, but I mean, it's a frame wall, but yeah, I mean, it would. The floor was framed out of I-joists. I don't know. Maybe we oversized the I-joist a little more, but they were 2 feet on center. I don't know.
and they're often a bigger problem because they have low mass.
Yeah.
They tend to feel bouncy, right? Because they're not
Yeah,
heavy.
they could.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Maybe a little more deflection because it was clear span beneath them. Oh.
Well, and
Every house is an experiment. Everything's a little different.
I think very subtle things could make a huge difference. Like a
Especially when it
bookcase.
comes to noise. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, if any of y'all have experience with this subject, I'd love to hear from you because mine
I
makes my house shake enough that we don't do laundry at night. It has to be during the day when we're awake. This comes from Neil. Hi, FHB team, longtime listener, first time caller. I recently got started working for a company converting camper vans. I've been a residential carpenter for 10 years and got a pretty good understanding of how wood-framed home building science works, at least in my climate zone. One of my first projects is designing and choosing our insulation/vapor barrier system. I realize I have no idea how a 16-gauge metal box is going to function in a wide variety of climates and without being continuously climate controlled on the interior. The owner of the company is sold on using Havelock wool insulation. My main concern is whether or not to install a vapor barrier and whether or not I need to somehow install a drainage plane between the insulation and the van shell in case of condensation on the back of the metal. Any thought on the subject would be greatly appreciated by me and the heavily misinformed DIY van building community. Thanks, Neil. Well, I look forward to counting myself amongst the heavily misinformed DIY van building community.
Well, Mike's been giggling since you started reading this, so I'm dying to hear what his thoughts are.
I have loved this question. I have converted as a little kid, my father converted a school bus into a camper, and then converted when I was probably 10 years old, he did that. Then he converted a couple vans, including an old Ford Econoline van. And
this is a dream of mine. It really is something I would
things.
love to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Mike, the bottom line is we need dew point control, right? We need some kind of rigid insulation, not wool fiber, right? Yeah.
Yeah, any type of
Isn't
fiber
everybody's
insulation is going to be a problem.
Yeah.
and isn't everybody's go-to going to be immediately spray foam? I
When
mean,
you
not
look
that I'm
at
advocating that, but isn't that the
Cut and
go-to when
cobble,
it
I
comes
think,
to
could work too, Kylie, because the way vans are built is there's like reinforcing ribs and large expanses of steel panel. And as you might imagine, the steel panel is an amazing thermal conductor. So cold, heat, whatever, it's coming right through that into the van's interior.
And the idea of putting a drainage plane on the inside edge of the steel, I'm just wondering, okay, so you'll get
Where's
the
it go?
condensation, yes, and it'll be a perfect drainage plane, yep, and then it dribbles down, and now your floor gets saturated.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And it's not just the walls you have to worry about because you've got the ceiling, which is steel, the walls that are steel, and then the floor, which is steel. So you got to insulate with insulation on all four surfaces in order to have a good continuous insulation around. You can't forget the floor. So yeah, there's a lot to this.
Oh,
What
okay.
did
So
your
I have a
dad
question.
do specific? I'm going to ask this first, Kylie, and then we'll come back.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Sure.
What did your dad do for this conundrum, Mike?
Well, he used the way we used to build houses back in, before insulation was available. You just don't put any insulation in.
And you have a
And-
ginormous
and you
air
just-
conditioner or heater, right?
Or you just whatever the temperature is, you dress accordingly.
I like that better.
Pretty much it.
Yeah.
In
So
the
I'm
summer,
doing.
it was. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No. In the summer, what?
No, I'm just saying. In the summer, it was hot, it was just hot as could be, and then in the winter, it was colder than it was outside. There was just no tempering it other than a sleeping bag or going outside when it was hot.
This question made me think of a story that I'm working on right now. I've just started into. It's a passive house project in Montana, but part of the project included converting an old grain silo, metal silo, into a bathhouse. And so I'm trying to determine, and of course, the solution for them in terms of insulation, a fully conditioned bathroom, essentially. It's very cool. Mike, you'd appreciate it. But I looked at the drawings, and from what I've gathered, all they've done is use spray foam to address insulation and vapor barrier and, like moisture control. So I was curious to see how you all were going to answer this question. Insulating and air sealing and controlling vapor in a metal structure. Is that something that people want to know about? I guess.
If you're building one of these, shipping container structures, it's the same problem and the same solutions. You need some kind of continuous insulation that's air impermeable, and there's not too many that I can think of. You got spray foam and you have sheets of foam. Am I forgetting any? Because mineral wool doesn't work because it's too vapor open.
Yeah.
I'm going to have to go down and investigate so here, Rhode Island, Quonset was a nearby. Quonset Naval Base was nearby my house, and you've probably all heard of Quonset huts. And after World War II, all of these Quonset huts were dismantled that were all over bases, particularly the Navy base down here, and people used them to build cheap houses in the late 40s and early 50s, and some people still live in them. And I wonder now what they did to control the moisture, if they just put up drywall and just put up fiber insulation and then got saturated walls, or what those buildings might smell like now, or if what they've done maybe they didn't put any insulation in. But I'm curious. I'm going to have to go knock on a couple doors.
So I have some peculiar experience that might be relevant here. So my first job ever was working for my local school district, preparing buses for painting. And that meant pulling lights off of the exterior and taping up, parts with masking tape and paper. And so school buses have fiberglass insulation that is between two layers of sheet metal. I think it's generally galvanized steel. And my guess is it does very little. But and the times I've seen inside of RVs also have fiberglass insulation for whatever reason. And my guess is that because it's so vapor open, when we do have dew point control problems and condensation building up, it can dry out. And I think the other part of that solution is if you see any RV, it's got a ginormous air conditioner on the roof, sometimes two. And, those, as I understand it, are about 1.5 tons of cooling. And you're talking about, an equivalently small space to be conditioning. So
I've owned 3 RVs over the years, and each one, or motorhomes, and each one, they had some sort of a foam core was the exterior wall. Sometimes it was a laminated, where it was fiberglass on the outside, laminated to some EPS, and then on the inside was laminated like a wood paneling or some other plastic paneling. So there's different ways of doing it to control that. But yeah, doing it on a retrofit for a camper van.
I was just about to say that's the difference between a retrofit and building new construction with steel siding.
Yep.
Like it's just totally different. Mm-hmm. Yeah. What can you? There are only so many options, as you said, Patrick.
Jeff, do you have a silver bullet to this problem?
No, unfortunately, I don't.
I don't think there is one.
We're back to Barbara's outbuilding.
It's too bad Neil didn't let us know the name of the company so we could let our listeners know not to go and buy one of their modified camper vans, at least if they're going to be using the Havelock wool, which is a great insulation.
Not for this.
But not for this.
Right, yeah.
The other problem with these, let's call them a building, is all the glass, right? You have incredible solar heat gain, and it all complicates this. So I think you just need a ton of heating or cooling to make it comfortable.
And heat loss.
Yeah, and the glass is all single pane glass, right?
This comes from Ben. Hello, FHB podcast crew. Recently, I've become more and more aware of our poor use of shutters as home ornamentation. I imagine today's faux shutters were originally designed to look like the real shutters used in medieval Europe. Before window glazing, they would block out the hot midday sun but still allow some needed ventilation. It would also stop those longbow arrows, I would point out, which you want to do. Lately, I'm noticing more and more homes with shutters that are too small for the window or doors they're adjacent to. Even if everyone knows these shutters only serve as ornamentation, shouldn't they at least look like they could adequately cover a window if functional? In my area, some homeowners are allowing the installation of faux shutters in ridiculous applications, such as this garage door below. To your knowledge, are there any appropriate applications or style of home that make the most sense for this type of faux shutter? Are there other areas of the home's exterior that need a clear rule of thumb, fabric awnings, plastic lattices, front yard decks, pink flamingos, etc.? I always enjoy your podcast. Keep up the great work. Ben. Oh, man, this is a great question. And one of my gripes, am I right? Anyone who's listened to the podcast have heard me complain about this.
I have to
Kyle?
share something, a quote
Go.
from Martin Holliday, because he has I looked up, of course, like what GBA has to offer on shutters. And there is one or two posts, but one of that caught my eye was on shutters and water management. But in it, he writes, a jarring element doesn't decorate the house, it disturbs the viewer. If the purpose of the shutters is decoration, why can't the builder get the proportions right? Why are decorative shutters almost always too narrow, less than 50% of the window width? Question mark. If the designer gets the proportions wrong, the shutters fail to fulfill even their decorative purpose. So I thought that was spot on for this question. This person's right in.
Do you have shutters on the house you're living in now, Kylie?
Let's see. Do my folks have shutters? I suppose they do. I didn't look carefully. I forget. They're so like part of. They have a handsome looking house. It's a cape. It wouldn't surprise me. I'm thinking. I know they have. It's white house siding with black. And I'm thinking, what's the black? It's not the trim. It's got to be the shutter. So yes, the answer is yes. Decorative, I'm sure. I'll have to go measure or take a look more carefully.
Mike, I think today was the first I've seen of your home's exterior in more than just a passing glance. But you have some pretty cool exterior elements. Among them are shutters, decorative or otherwise, on your house.
No.
Look at his eyeballs.
Way.
They just got twice as big. He's like, never.
When I used to build spec houses, it was you'd do anything that the other builders were doing to make your house just look market
Normal.
red,
Yep.
And I was always puzzled by the fake shutters because the louvers on them, at least if you get the louvered style, the molded ones, you're installing them backwards. In other words, they're the traditional shutter. If you go out to where people really put on the wooden shutters, which my grandparents had, because I used to hang them and have to take them down and paint them, and they had the shutter dogs that would keep them from swinging in the wind. Anyway, when you close them, the louvers would shed water, which means when you open them, it actually sheds water to the wall side when the water hits the louvers. But all the plastic fake ones are designed to shed water out.
You're supposed to put them on upside down.
But if you get the ones with the cathedral tops, you put them on upside down. Well, you have to do them upside down, or you turn them backwards, and they were always vinyl, and they were I don't know. I hated installing those things.
It sounds like
I took them each rental house I would buy, people would have put those on, obviously. First thing I did was unscrew those and then just paint it right up to the window trim the way things should be.
I will say, I notice when I look at architecture a lot, or houses, just homes. I like looking at homes of all kinds. And I notice when the shutters are real. It's clear when they're functional. And it makes my heart sing inside. I'm like, oh, I just love that.
Me too, especially when they have the real hardware that would, allow them to operate, and Mike mentioned the shutter dogs, which are these rotating metal knobs, I guess you'd call them, that hold the shutter against the building when
Oh,
it's
okay.
not in use.
My folks actually gave up a house in part, a property on the water up in Maine, because they were getting older, and it was like, anyway, it's work, and not everybody's up for it. But I do remember thinking, oh yeah, somebody's got to go out there and do that. I hadn't thought about it before then. I was much younger.
What I
Yeah.
love there are regional traditions of shutters, like on the Gulf Coast. They're often arranged like awnings, and they're common on, I think it's called conch style houses, which is a Key West specific in South Florida type of architecture.
How do you spell that, Patrick? How do you spell that? I don't know that term.
Conch, I think,
Huh.
Kylie.
Okay.
Mike's nodding.
You're
Okay.
right. Yep.
And then on Cape Cod, they're often louvered, but more often paneled shutters in many cases, which are pretty awesome too, right, Mike?
My mother had shutters on her mobile home. They were just pieces of soffit material that somebody screwed a T across the back, or a little strip across the back, and then they screwed them to the wall.
That's horrible.
Humorous. I think the other things that are on the list that Ben offered, any rules of thumb for fabric awnings, plastic lattice, front yard decks, pink flamingos, etc. That would make a great after show. All the crazy things you see people putting on their houses to kind of dress them up from what a
Tack
nice,
on.
simple design, architectural design, proportioned would do for you if it was so designed, without
I
having
got
those extra things on.
you all have to
And
who
this-
are listening to the show have to go to the podcast page to check out this garage faux shutter
That's the best.
thing. That was like
That is really funny.
Quite
I gotta think,
something.
I've never. Have you ever seen that before? I had never seen that
no,
That's a first.
that's really
So
bad.
describe what it is for the people who can't get to the page.
before.
All right, let me do my best here. So what are there, like 1x3s? Three of them, right? And they're kind of board and batten arrangement on the sides of this garage. And oh my goodness, it is really, really hard to look at. Was that a pretty adequate discussion?
Hard to
Description?
look at the part that I heard. Yeah.
They look like what, about 14 or 16 inches wide. You got a big wide garage door, like a 9-foot wide door.
Yeah.
So the irony of all of this is that shutters are super useful for storms,
Yeah.
right? For wind-blown debris. And, in certain parts of the country, they still make a lot of sense. And I
then-
would love to see more of them out there.
Increasingly in more areas of the country. I remember Patrick one time, my little Connecticut house I always felt so scared by the limbs of the trees and
Yeah.
the tornadoes that would touch down regularly. And I would have felt a whole lot better if I had shutters, And that's just because I remember asking you, what should I do to protect my house? And you said, cover the windows. And I thought, how the heck am I going to do that? And all my windows were different, odd size shapes, and, all these things. It's made it feel seemingly impossible to get pie,
And
point being,
easy solutions,
shutters are
Kylie,
useful.
easy solutions like these ones that deploy with a, turn of a switch, those are very expensive. Yeah.
Right.
Once again, useful though, and you do see them on Gulf Coast houses because, research has proven that if windows break or garage doors are breached, boy, there is a way bigger chance the house is not going to survive and it's going to have some kind of catastrophic failure.
And also just it makes your house more susceptible to water damage.
Yeah.
But it's not even just, it can, prolonged water damage is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Jeff, do you have shutters on your house?
No.
Good
Have
job.
you ever?
The house I grew up in had
And what were they? Were they functional or plastic?
no, they were fake. It was a '60s Center Hall Colonial.
They are ubiquitous in my neighborhood. Like every house of a certain era has these plastic shutters, and Some look better than others because, as we've all talked about, they have to be at least close to the window size before they make
Proportions,
any
right?
sense.
Right.
And then the one that gets me are the rectangular shutters when you have an arch top window.
Oh, oh, that almost hurts my skin.
It does,
Yeah,
doesn't it? Oh, we're having too much fun.
I know, right?
Now, all the listeners who have these shutters on their houses are all
I
going to
know,
be
and that's
cringing. We don't want to make you feel too bad. It does,
it's totally.
it's not uncommon, and you're
It's
not
They're
going to
not.
improve the
everywhere.
house.
They're everywhere.
It's not.
And
It's not exactly. It's not just not uncommon. It's ubiquitous, right?
Yeah.
yeah. And some of these houses that are in my neighborhood would have really, 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 really boring and ugly exteriors. The shutters in many cases kind of break up the elevation. So I see why it's done.
That's why they came. Yeah, exactly. That's where they came to be. And like I consider the house that I'm in to be a good-looking house. And as soon as we're done, I'm running out there. I'm like, I can't believe I don't know if there are shutters.
You have to put a photo up on the podcast
At the same
page.
time, it's like it's not going to ruin it for me. Let's just say I still think it's a good-looking house. So.
This comes from Sam. Hey there, FHB podcast. My name is Sam. I'm an apprentice carpenter in Nova Scotia, Canada, but I spend my winters at a university in Ottawa. I'm just starting to listen in and I'm keen to learn from you all. I rent a home in Ottawa next to a busy roadway, often passed by trucks at 80 kilometers an hour. The house is very poorly insulated from sound. I tend to think there is no insulation anywhere in the house. I can generally understand conversations beneath my second floor room. Most of my windows are single pane and heat transfer from the outdoors is free flowing. My question for you here is, in my rented room, are there ways alongside replacing the windows to insulate my room from the noises coming from both the outdoors and from beneath my room? I also wonder what sort of complications I'll encounter removing/replacing the window. The exterior of this house is a form of siding made of stucco and small rocks which slowly fall off. Thank you for reading and I would appreciate you letting me know what episode I should look to watch for potential feedback on this. Well, this is episode
581.
581, if that's helpful.
Should be. Don't they go up with the number on them?
No, it doesn't matter because we've only said it while he's listening, right, Kylie? He's already listening to the show.
Right. I hadn't thought about that. Right. I guess
What do you guys think?
You can email him. Just email him.
Well, why don't you email him? Introduce yourself. Let him down easy because we're not going to be able to help him with his rental house in any way, is my guess, right?
Right. Maybe I don't want
First
to.
thing that came to my mind was, if you're renting a house, and how long will you be renting there? And if it's only while you're going to university, only 3, 4, maybe 2, 3 more years. So do you want to invest money in the house? Unless it's a family house.
Buy yourself some wax earplugs or some of these babies.
Yeah, I was going to say buy some Bose noise-canceling headphones and study. Instead of working on the stucco house that's not yours.
Sound attenuation, though, is a great topic, and it's so much easier to address in new construction, it seems, than in retrofits. There's not a lot you can do.
Stock air movement is the best thing you can do, but once again, on Sam's rental property, that's a challenge.
Yeah,
there are things you can do, if it wasn't a rental property, and maybe if Sam's renting from a family member, or if it's a landlord that would be inclined to see some improvements done to the building, maybe it's a good project. Sam could get paid to upgrade the whole house.
Yeah.
So one thing that they do, my nephew lives alongside the airport here in Rhode Island. He watches the planes come in right at eye level with his bedroom window. And so as the runways were expanded, the airport paid for upgrades to the houses to make them more soundproof. So it was basically dense packed cellulose in the walls was one step, which made the house more energy efficient and cut down on the sound transmission. The next thing was dual pane windows for the single pane. That helped, But then within another 3 years, they figured it wasn't helping enough, so they put in triple pane windows, which significantly helped. So those would be the upgrades that would be advisable. Now, the windows in the stucco, yeah, they can be a problem if you want to swap them out. But what I would say is just putting a storm window on, you'll get a little better energy performance, and that should help cut down on the road noise that's coming through the single pane windows.
And it might help to do that just on the inside is the most minimal of steps, right? And that might be something you can make yourself, Sam, that might help a lot.
Yeah, just a piece of acrylic, clear acrylic, and just duct tape it on for the period you're there.
Right, because he's not going to get into renovating his walls. I mean, how often do you see people renovate their walls to add sound attenuating insulation for that purpose only? Like, my house is noisy. I want to fix that. Let me rip my walls apart and add a different type of insulation. How often is that the solution that people choose?
Well, blown in cellulose. You just do it from the.
But they have to take out what they already have, right? That's a big project, isn't it?
There's a good chance that there's like no insulation in this house, or in the houses
this house,
around,
I'm just talking more generally.
Yeah.
Well, even if there is, like the house, my rental houses, several of them were built in the early '60s, and they put in 2 inches of fiberglass bat into a 3.5-inch wall cavity. So what the insulators do, and it's really common around here, is they drill 2 holes from the outside, and then they just put they have reducing pipes, and they just shove their cellulose tube as high up or low down on one side of that, on the outside face of the fiberglass, so that the vapor retarder gets pushed to the inside of the drywall, and then they just dense pack it. And it basically crushes the fiberglass. It's a technique that, I guess from what the insulator said, this took us a while to, each of our new guys on the crew takes them a while to learn how to do it. But once they do, they can knock it out in not much time.
Okay.
So there's two kinds of sound transfer. We have impact noise and, sound waves that move on air, and the highway noise is going to be air. So anything you can do to prevent air from coming into that space is gonna help. Like people walking around on the floor is an impact type noise, and that's harder to solve without specialized assemblies. But soft floor covering can help a little, and just soft surfaces. I remember when I started broadcasting from here, Jeff, you had me hang up moving blankets because it was so echoey. Is that the same problem that?
Well, acoustics is different than sound transmission, but
it would help though if on that exterior wall, you think it would help if he hung up some heavy-duty moving blankets. It's kind of like insulation. It kind of cuts the sound transmission.
I learned in an article I did years ago that soft, dense materials are best at stopping sound, right? Their flexible nature allows them to better absorb sound waves than something that's rigid. Mass-loaded vinyl would be better than a moving blanket, I'm sure, but if there was nothing on the wall, I think a moving blanket might help.
Patrick, I'm not sure I've ever heard that term, mass-loaded vinyl. What does that mean?
This is like a go-to product in the acoustics and sound attenuation biz, Kylie.
Okay.
It looks like vinyl sheet flooring, except I think they put a ton of carbon black in it and other like heavy compounds to
Give it density.
make these dense materials to stop sound.
yeah, it's 1 pound per square foot.
Wow.
It's amazing when
What a fascinating field.
It's so deceiving when you go and you think, oh, it's just a sheet of roll of vinyl, and you go to pick it up and it's like, oh,
It's like a weighted blanket. I ordered a weighted
really
blanket.
heavy.
Oh my God. It came to my doorstep like all the had busted out of the package and I could barely get it inside. I was like, how am I going to sleep with this thing?
it's hard to breathe under a blanket like that.
Yeah.
The UPS driver is cursing you, right? It's like, what are you mailing?
What is this?
A mass-loaded blanket.
A mass-loaded play, exactly.
That's what it is, right? Do you think we were helpful to Sam at all? I mean, at the risk of being cavalier, Sam, look for another apartment that's quieter.
Well, I'm here to tout the benefits of noise canceling headphones. It can change your life. So try that first, especially as a student. As a student who needs to study, you live in a drafty old house that's really noisy. Don't get into ripping your walls apart unless, as Mike said, this is something you could get paid for. It's an interest you want to pursue. You're going to enjoy it, all those things. But if you just need to study and get out or get on with your life, as Patrick says, block the sound in a simple, cheap way.
So
That's my
short of that, hang some heavy-duty, quilted, thick, moving blankets on the wall, and then for the floor, either lay down the same thing or put down a shag rug.
Yeah, just soften the room somehow.
Yeah.
So we've been talking at Fine Homebuilding that we need to do a feature article on this subject. So if any of you are listening have someone who's knowledgeable in this field, I would love to talk to them about working on an article. So anyone listening who's got that connection, I'd be grateful. And you can send that to the fhbpodcast@taunton.com. So we should remind folks before we get to our final element that our after show is going to be about landscaping, connecting the indoors and outdoors, and how a beautiful outdoor environment can do a lot for your life and your indoor environment. So could be fun. Did you guys understand this little gem that we had sent to us from David? Who wants to try and explain it? It came to me coincidentally while I was at the Northeast Building Science Symposium, which was recently
then it's your
held
job to explain it.
in Stafford, Connecticut. And not exaggerating, so Ross Trethewey, who is an expert in the field of heating and cooling, was giving his presentation when this happened to come to the podcast inbox, and it just delighted me.
That is really funny.
Someone try and explain this.
I can't seem to open it, and I wouldn't be able to anyway. Mike?
It's a heat pump. So it's a stick figure heat pump with a person actually moving the heat. So
Like a little accordion.
Like an accordion that has a device, like a container, which has an accordion side on it, goes into the building, and I'm guessing he wants to move heat outside. So this would be in the air conditioning mode. You capture the air in the house. Basically. You squeeze it down. You're squeezing that heat energy, and then you're taking it out, and then you're releasing it. I'm guessing that's the way it works, but
it's a pretty elegant visual description or representation of how this works. You're compressing a gas, and that's going to absorb heat when you allow it to evaporate. When it goes back into as it transfers from a liquid back to a gas, and then you're going to squeeze it again and use it to move energy back inside the building, right? Am I getting that correct, right? We're going to compress it again. We're going to turn it back into a liquid. We're going to blow air over it, which is going to make the gas vaporize and absorb heat. And then we're going to take that gas, we're going to send it through the compressor, turn it back into a liquid, send it back inside, have the air blow over it, and release the gas absorbing heat.
It's an illustration that if you looked at it and you didn't understand how heat pumps work or air conditioning work or refrigerators work or any of those refrigerant-based systems, you just scratch your head and go, I have no clue what's going on. But if you understand the heat pump cycle, then it makes kind of sense.
It's funny or coincidental. I had a conversation with someone at the BS Symposium. Is like the refrigeration cycle escapes me. It's just like I can't get my head around it. And I was like, my epiphany moment was learning that it absorbs heat to make cool. It doesn't make cold. It absorbs heat and puts it somewhere else, and the result is cold. And
Yep.
is is that helpful?
Yeah, that is helpful.
You know,
I like how you
I
said
look
that.
at it. I look at it a different way. You're moving heat from where you either don't want it to get rid of it, like in the summertime, you're taking the heat out of the house and you're throwing it outside. And when you want heat, you're taking it from the outside and you're bringing it inside. And most people don't realize that even when it's 0 degrees Fahrenheit outside, there's still heat energy in that cold outdoor air. And you're just using the heat pump as a concentrator through the refrigeration cycle. But until you get into some like diagrams that show the whole cycle, it words just can't explain it. I've tried
You're
for years, and it's
It
only
is
when I
hard. That's refreshing to hear. I find it very hard to articulate. What I find funny about this drawing is when I look at this, and the caption is manual heat pumps are such a pain. So when I was looking at this and I thought, wow, that makes heat pumps look really energy intensive, you know? but the key word is manual in this drawing. Because they're not energy intensive. They're energy saving. So, but the principle is energy intensive in a
And
sense.
it's the fundamental idea is you're alternating liquids to gases and gases to liquids, and it's either happening inside or outside to get the heat, as Mike pointed out. It's either coming from inside during the cooling, or it's coming from the outside during heating.
they're around us everywhere you go. There's a heat pump. You go into a supermarket, there's heat pumps that are keeping all of the frozen products cold and all of the chilled products chilled. You go in your own house, you've got a heat pump in your dehumidifier, you've got a heat pump in your refrigerator, you've got a heat pump in your air conditioner. Even if you don't think you have heat pumps, you have heat pumps. You have air conditioning in your car, you've got a heat pump in your car. It's everywhere. You can't, well, in modern
See,
life, you
you can't
can't
get
go
rid of it.
anywhere pretty much without bumping into a heat pump.
It's because
Sometimes
it's so useful to be able to move energy around in this way, right? It's that's the whole raison d'être is, yeah.
I've been
I
listening to I have a refrigerator that's like, I'm suddenly sitting in very close proximity to a refrigerator because I live in essentially a tiny house. I mean, that's like, that's the thing
yeah.
about living in small spaces. You're very attuned to everything that's happening, right? So I've been listening periodically. All of a sudden, I hear something switch on whereby it sounds like there's the leak, like a very active leaking action. And I realized, I was like, what the heck is that? And I finally realized it's the refrigerant line, condensate probably running its course,
Or
right?
it's
That's
on
what I'm hearing.
defrost. Your freezer's defrosting. Sometimes that sounds like
Something, yeah.
water. Yeah.
A little gurgly
It's
sound.
very
Yeah,
gurgly running, yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I recently dove into the subject of ground source heat pumps, which I've always been very skeptical of because I've always argued that, instead of spending tens of thousands of dollars to drill holes in the ground, why not make envelope upgrades with the same amount of money? And then all of a sudden you don't need giant heat pumps or the expensive infrastructure. But the problem with our electrification efforts in this country are that, at peak load, we're going to need tons of power that we just don't have right now. And ground source heat pumps, because the ground is such a stable temperature, need far less electricity when it's 110 degrees out and 90% humidity than an air source heat pump, which starts to have diminished efficiency and need even more energy than it would have in more moderate conditions. So it's an interesting series of problems we have to solve.
What's the angle of your story, Patrick?
Well, do ground source heat pumps make sense is my working title, Kylie. And I think in commercial buildings where air sealing is a problem because you have doors opening constantly, or if you have a hospital with similar problems for space conditioning, probably makes a lot of sense. For a residence where the loads are pretty controlled and you have the potential to create a tight building envelope, I think it's probably overkill for all but the most huge houses or cooling loads and heating loads and, indoor swimming pools jump to mind when we're talking about those kind of situations. So I don't know. That's a perfect segue to landscaping. Am I right?
In a sense, sure. Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. I hope you all stay tuned for our after show where we're talking about landscaping. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. And please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Stay tuned for the after show. Thanks, y'all.